From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
The Republican Chaos Caucus returns as a GOP rump derails the election of Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House. Welcome, I'm Kyle Peterson with the Wall Street Journal. We are joined today by my colleagues, columnist Kim Strassel and editorial board member Kate Batchelder-Odell. Welcome to you both on this exciting Tuesday. As we sit here taping, they are doing the second ballot for the Speaker of the House. On the first ballot, the winner, at least getting the most votes, was Democrat Congressman Hakeem Jeffries with 212 votes, then Kevin McCarthy with 203, and about a dozen and a half Republicans voting for somebody else. Of course, to get elected as Speaker of the House under the rules as they sit before us now, you have to get a majority, which is 218 if everyone is voting. And so, Kim, maybe the best place to start is just to catch us up a little bit with where we are now and what the process is from here on out.
Sure. So now that this first vote has failed, we have moved on to a second one. And here's the problem is someone needs to get 218 under the current rules to become Speaker of the House. And what we had in the first vote was a sizable defection from McCarthy. People had thought that there would be 7 or 8 people who defected. In the end, it was closer to 20. And that certainly did not look good for him. Now what we have is Jim Jordan, the member from Ohio, who is a member of the Freedom Caucus, or was, but decided to go into leadership a few years ago. He has a lot of respect from very conservative members of the House. He stood up and gave a rousing endorsement of McCarthy, made a lot of arguments for him and tried to inspire everyone and remember that they are there for common purpose to get things done. And then this was followed by one of the rebels, Matt Gaetz, standing up and nominating Jim Jordan for the speakership. And here we go with the second vote. And I think the thing, to be watching, the clear play here by those that do not like McCarthy is to try to gin up enthusiasm for an alternate person. And we'll see how that comes out in the second vote. Right now, it doesn't look as though he has enough to win the second vote, and so we will go on.
Let's listen to a piece of that speech by Jim Jordan. Again, this is before the second round of balloting, and he is renominating Kevin McCarthy for Speaker of the House.
We had better come together and fight for these key things, these 3 things. That's what the people want us to do. And I think Kevin McCarthy is the right guy to lead us. I really do, or I wouldn't be standing up here giving this speech. I came in with Kevin. We came in the same time 16 years ago. We haven't always agreed on everything, but I like his fight. I like his tenacity, and I liked it. I remember Kevin told me, I actually wrote about this in a book. I remember Kevin told me, he said, when the toughest times in life are when you get knocked down, the question is, can you come back? And I've always seen him be able to do that. We need to rally around him because this is what the people sent us here to do.
Until the House elects a speaker, though, all of its members are kind of stuck. It can't get any business done until it gets organized, and the House could vote to adjourn if there is a majority available to do that. Otherwise, they just end up voting over and over and over again. And let's listen to a piece of Kevin McCarthy. This is him speaking before the voting began this morning.
I have the record for the longest speech ever on the floor. I don't have a problem getting a record for the most votes for Speaker, too. Thank you all. Well, I don't see how a few people, maybe it's 5, maybe it's 20, sit because they want a gavel that they can't earn by the conference of themselves. That would be interesting to me. That's not what the constituents voted him for.
One thing to note on McCarthy's last point there is that he already won a leadership vote within the Republican conference last year that was 188 to 31. And so it wasn't even as if it was a close run thing between Kevin McCarthy and any of the token candidates that are being put up to oppose him right now. It is more of an anti-McCarthy movement than a pro-anyone else movement, it seems to me. But Kate, it seems like McCarthy's strategy here is just to welcome the voting over and over and over again. And maybe as the hours wear on, some people will get fed up and decide that they need an exit, or there will be some people who will choose to vote that they're present or will not vote, will leave the chamber, and that lowers the total number to get a majority that he needs.
Right, Kyle. So Democrats are all showing up to vote because if they leave the floor, to your point, it lowers the threshold that you need to win. So we're in basically a really long question here of who is going to blink first. And to your point about it not being so much pro anyone else as anti-McCarthy, I think that's right. But I also think that some of the holdouts here were shrewd to pick Jordan. Jordan has 19 votes right now in the second ballot. His speech that he gave nominating McCarthy was compelling. He's got a lot of conservative credibility. He's a former Republican Study Committee chair before he started the Freedom Caucus. He's a normal guy, Ohio wrestling dad. So I think that he was a good pick if you were going to try to prop somebody else out. That said, I don't really see where this ends if most of the conference is overwhelmingly favoring Leader McCarthy, including Jim Jordan. I think that the demands that Matt Gaetz and colleagues have made are not reasonable ones. So there's been a debate, for instance, on what the threshold is for vacating the chair and who can decide basically how to depose the speaker. Is it 5 members? There's been some suggestion that it should be 1 member, which means anybody could take control at any time. That's not a tenable way for anybody to govern. So I don't think that the demands that Gaetz and others have made can really be satisfied here. So it really is an open question how this will end. But I do think it doesn't seem like there's anywhere to go but McCarthy here.
Kim, talk about some of the concessions that Kevin McCarthy has made. He has spent weeks courting these dissenters and trying to persuade them that it's in everyone's interest to get him to 218 votes here, or whatever the final majority number ends up being. And obviously, he's been unsuccessful on the first and probably the second ballot here. But that doesn't mean that there was any lack of trying, I think, on his part.
Yes. I mean, he has made an extraordinary number of concessions. An important one was changing the makeup of the steering committee. And by the way, some of this is going to sound very inside baseball, but it matters a great deal to the members and how things operate in the House. So he agreed to change the makeup of the steering committee. This is the body that kind of makes nominations for which members sit on which committees. A lot of conservatives have felt over the years that they have been excluded from some of the more important committees, whether that be the high-profile ones like Ways and Means or the Appropriations Committee, where they would like to try to tame some of the appropriators, or the House Rules Committee, which comes up with the rules about how things go to the floor. He made a number of concessions in terms of transparency, the way that bills are debated, the opportunity to amend them, how long they need to be on the floor before there's a vote to ensure that members have time to see them. These all get to issues that members had with what they felt was too many backroom dealings and leadership making too many of the decisions instead of the rank and file doing it through debate and committee activity. The big one, obviously, was the motion to vacate the chair. And this is a rule that was used years ago that effectively caused John Boehner to resign. It's kind of an arcane rule that no one had much used, but a rump group of Republicans had threatened to bring it up. At one point, it allowed for any person in the Congress to call for a vote, basically of confidence in the Speaker of the House. After what happened to Boehner, Nancy Pelosi recognized the problems with having people do that right and left, and she changed it to a majority of the Congress. The rebels here have wanted McCarthy to lower the threshold. He had wanted it to be a majority of the majority. They had whittled it down to a percentage. Now it's down to just 5 members could get together and call for a vote of no confidence. This is essentially very problematic. It could make it almost impossible for any speaker to govern. And they had wanted it to go back down to 1. And he said, no, this is apparently one of the sticking points. But he has made a lot of concessions. So it's notable that they still are saying it's not enough.
I'll pull out a few of these too. He says that he's going to create a subcommittee on the weaponization of the federal government to investigate things like the FBI's speech policing on Twitter, as well as probably its intervention in the 2016 presidential race. He says that he will mandate that bill text to be released at least 72 hours before a final vote is held. And he's also said that he will end proxy voting, which has been hugely abused. Kate, I mean, it seems to me that this rules package that the McCarthy side has put out includes some pretty significant changes, at least to the way that the chamber is operating right now.
Yeah, it does, Kyle. I mean, and note the irony, the ironic tension there. McCarthy has made all those concessions that Kim's describing, and Gaetz and his colleagues are saying that he wants it too bad, and he also hasn't made enough concessions, right? So I don't know that he can make any concession that would satisfy what they're looking for. They seem to just not want him. To your point about the rules, I think the 72 hours one is an important one, especially for public confidence that Congress is actually reading or thinking about these bills that they pass. There are also a number of other good fixes, like you noted on proxy voting. I mean, basically, you have to sign something saying that you're not available to vote by proxy. You're not available to be on the floor because of the COVID-19 emergency. And now members of both parties are just using it to go to fundraisers. Or, there was a case early on in the pandemic where somebody called in to a committee vote from a boat. It's just gotten into absurdity. I would also add that the committees are a really important part of how divided government would work. I mean, one of the GOP's biggest priorities here should be oversight of a variety of things that the Biden administration is doing. So one of the committees you just mentioned, really important. Another one I would add would be the Select Committee on China that Kevin McCarthy has picked Mike Gallagher to run, which could also yield some really substantive work in educating America about the threat from China, our economic relationship with China, and other subjects like that. And this is an area that really matters and why you need to get these committees set up and need to have somebody in charge. Biden's student loan gambit, which he did by executive authority, or the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, there's been a lot of information that the public doesn't have because we haven't had divided adversarial government. So I think that is one thing that you have to think about as you're asking, why does all this chaos matter? That oversight work and getting people in the right positions who are serious about doing it is important for the functioning of government.